Good morning, it's October 30th, and this is To My Little Friends. How many of you remember during the last presidential campaign hearing Joe Biden say that he would wage a war on the fossil fuel industry? He actually said it stronger when he declared he would, quote, end the fossil fuel. Now, I would say he's lived up to that promise. He's gone after every gas appliance you might have and told Americans they have to ditch their gas-powered vehicles and buy an electric one. But it is with electric cars he's garnered so much attention. In deciding to end fossil fuels, the president, fueled by the left, has two avenues. He could attack the demand for affordable and efficient carbon-based fuels like coal, gas, and oil, try to encourage people to use less of them, or he could attack the supply, making it harder to produce them in the first place. He's pursued both simultaneously and as fast as Congress and the courts will let him. And all this climate change policy sounds good in theory, but in reality it's just Biden caving to the political left and his party. If you assume that carbon in the atmosphere is a global thing and not a nation-by-nation thing, then you'll quickly realize that Biden is being played the fool. China continues to expand its coal production, and in 1 year they equaled that expansion, nearly equaled the European Union's annual production. India and Russia are doing almost nothing to help the climate change debate, and so Biden makes the U.S. consumer pay through the nose to appease the wonky leftists that populate both his administration and the Democratic Party. Well, this past week, the major automakers began admitting they're losing money on every EV they produce. They're also admitting that the public's not ready to buy electric vehicles they're making. And there are a lot of reasons for the reluctance of the public to go out and buy an electric car. First and foremost is the cost. Even when the manufacturer is losing money, even with the tax credits for buying an electric car, the sales are just not there. Then you have the inconvenience of making a long trip. As an example, I recently drove to Portland, Oregon from St. George, Utah. The distance is just under 1,100 miles. Now, we broke up the trip on the way up and stopped in Boise. On the way home, we left early in the morning and drove straight through. We had to stop for gas on both trips. On the way up, we did it in Boise and then drove into Portland the next day. On the way back, we stopped in Twin Falls for gas and then drove to St. George. In an electric car, we would have to plan our stops every 250 to 300 miles and spend 45 minutes charging. And that charge would cost us probably about $15. That means we would be spending about $60 in charging fees. That'd be cheaper than the gas, which would be about $110, but we'd also have to factor in a couple extra hours. Car and Driver did a test, and they came up with the conclusion in a Chevy Bolt that it costs more on the road than gas power. Around town, the EV wins. This was similar to other EVs, including Tesla. For around town, it works if you can charge at home. On the road, it's about even at best, and you have the inconvenience. And that makes a major assumption. They're assuming, as in the Biden administration wonks, that everyone can charge at home in a garage. And that's not true for millions and millions of people. Hence the major reluctance of people to buy an electric car. Cost and convenience. But the Biden administration is all in their EV policy, and they have too much politically and financially invested to let any of these EV companies go under. Ford Motor Company, the one that just signed an agreement with UAW, lost $3.1 billion in the first 9 months of this year on EVs. Those losses will doubtless grow, and anyone who thinks Washington won't give automakers another bailout should think again. The same could be said about the wind energy sector. Last week, Munich-based Siemens Energy, one of the world's top wind manufacturers, said the German government is prepared to extend as much as $16.9 billion in state guarantees to rescue it. American companies are also pleading for government help. Large offshore wind developers in September importuned New York's Public Service Commission to increase contractual payments by an average of 48% to cover their costs. Regulators thankfully rejected their request. Developers are mulling whether to cancel the project if they can't coax more corporate welfare out of the Biden administration. Denmark's Ørsted, the world's top offshore wind developer, and the U.S. governors in the Northeast are lobbying the White House to boost subsidies in the Inflation Reduction Act, which had nothing to do with inflation, by the way, to cover 50% of wind project costs. Taxpayers and electricity customers will inevitably have to pay more for support this wind energy. And that's according to Ørsted's own CEO, Mads Nipper, where he said, and if they don't, neither we nor any of our colleagues are going to build more offshore. It's very simple. Other wind executives are handing down similar ultimatums. One of the largest UK power generators, RWE, told the British government last week that its payments to wind developers would have to rise 70% if it wanted more projects built. Now, I'm all for continued development of renewable energy sources, but you cannot ignore the marketplace at the same time and implement these policies by governmental decree. The public won't accept it. And some of those companies that bought into the Democrats' push for all-electric fleet of cars are now saying, hold on. For now, automakers are simply pumping the brakes on their EV investments. Tesla recently paused plans for a new factory in Mexico. General Motors CEO Mary Barra last week scrapped the company's electric vehicle production goals, citing flagging demand. Honda, on October 25th, scuttled plans to manufacture low-cost electric vehicles with GM. EVs are a pretty brutal space. Mercedes CFO Harrison Williams said the other day, I can hardly imagine the current status quo is fully sustainable for anybody. Ford joined the pileup and postponed $12 billion in planned electric vehicle investment, stating that buyers aren't willing to pay a premium over gasoline cars, even with a $7,500 federal tax credit and hefty state subsidies. Ford CFO John Lawler said, quote, the customer is going to decide what the volumes are. Well, has the company checked with its regulators about that? I suspect they're checking with the marketplace and not the politicians writing these regulations. And what they're learning is the customers don't want them right now. This has been To My Liberal Friends. Thanks for listening. If you enjoy the podcast, hit the subscribe button. If you have a comment, please leave it.